2016. That, of course, was not the strategy that was pursued by the last government. And what is the difference that that made? Well, the party opposite saddled this country with an extraordinary £1 trillion of debt higher than the situation that we left with. That's why we're paying £1 in 10 in interest rates today, because they more than doubled the national debt. And before we hear any nonsense about COVID, let us just remember that 80 to 90% of the increase in debt that the Conservative saddles us with was before the COVID lockdowns began. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Oh, nothing as contemporary as COVID, don't worry about that. I just wondered how much money he left in the coffers when he was Chief Secretary in 1997.
Well, I can tell him. I don't know what his faculty of maths is like. I don't know if he realises that a trillion has 12 noughts. But we left the national debt £1 trillion lower than it is today. £2.7 trillion. That is how much this country is now borrowing. Now, the great tragedy, of course, of all of this is that if they had borrowed money at low interest costs and actually invested it in something that enhanced productivity, we would be in a better position today. The Chancellor wouldn't have had to deliver the budget that she had to deliver today. Don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. Look at the International Monetary Fund. 25th of July, the report is very clear. The fact is that our productivity growth under the party opposite collapsed by a third compared to the good old New Labour years. Our productivity divergence now with the United States is so serious. Our productivity growth has been half what it has been in the United States. And the OBR is really clear today. The downgrade on growth that they have baked into their numbers is entirely because of the productivity collapse, because they wasted the money during their 14 years in office. And of course, I should just say, by the by, because Conservatives are Conservatives, they managed to put £1 trillion on the debt, they managed to collapse the productivity numbers, and they still managed to put inequality up through the roof. That is why we all had in our constituencies food bank queues that we will never forget. I will never forget, for as long as I live, the phenomenon of collecting food in inner city Birmingham because our food banks had run out of food. I will never forget the children at Adderley School who were literally helping restock our food banks by taking penguin bars out of their lunch boxes to put them in food collection crates so that their classmates didn't go hungry at lunchtime. That's the reality of the child poverty legacy that this party left us with, and that is the legacy that the Chancellor got to grips with today. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we look forward on our committee to scrutinising the proposals that have been laid out today. We have been travelling the country over the last couple of weeks, talking to business about what they wanted out of this budget. And there were three things that were very clear. What is extraordinary about this country? These are aisles, extraordinary new era of innovation. This is an extraordinary country. We are an inventive country. We have been since the Industrial Revolution started in Birmingham back in 1761. But that is going to be as of nothing compared to what is about to unfold in this country, and we are at the front of the grid in the race for the 21st century. But we need to mobilise capital on a completely new scale, and that is why certainty for business was so important. So I welcome the fact that the headroom has been put up to £22 billion today. I welcome the Chancellor is ending this biannual circus of fiscal speculation by having one forecast a year. I have to say to the House that I seriously think that Mr Hughes needs to consider his position. The fact that we have had a leak of the OBR forecast before this House got to debate the budget, I think is appalling, and it has bedevilled us, this uncertainty. Now, alongside that, we have got to step up the mobilisation of capital on a completely different scale. I will in a moment. That's why I absolutely welcome the package that the Chancellor has set out today to mobilise investment capital in a completely radically new way. The expanding of EMI, the boosting of VCTs, the UK listing relief, that is almost £3 billion worth of extra incentives for our entrepreneurs in this country. That is a game changer, not just for startups, but for scale-ups who are trying to make sure that we end this craziness of brilliant people in this country, brilliant inventors in this country, starting new businesses, growing it nicely, and then getting snapped up and shifted out to the United States. We have to make sure that we are growing and fostering more big, global dominating companies here in this country. So I welcome the way the Chancellor lent in behind those firms today. But the third thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we've got to do is to improve the return on investment of investments made in this country. So that means a couple of things. It means bringing down energy costs radically. We didn't have a business energy cost scheme scored in the budget today, but that is because I know the government is now out to consultation. Every single member of our committee would implore the government to do whatever it takes to make sure business energy costs in our country are internationally competitive. It is wrong that firms like Nissan say to us that their energy costs up in Sunderland are the most expensive energy costs of any Nissan plant in the world. We have got to bring business energy costs down. But the message alongside that we hear from small business in particular is that we have also got to bring down business rates. So, looking at the policy decisions in the scorecard, that looks like about a £4.2 billion subsidy to help bring business rates down. That should mean that we have the lowest business rates that we have seen in this country. That is a very good thing. But where I would urge the Chancellor to go further is in making sure that we actually cut the costs of red tape in a really bold and radical way. As we travelled around the country, Madam Deputy Speaker, business after business told us not just that they want less red tape, they want better regulation. And crucially, they want departments to coordinate with each other and regulators to coordinate with each other. So we don't have one department over here making one decision and another department over here making another. And so ensuring that we have a Whitehall machine that actually moves at the speed of business in this new age of AI is going to be more and more important as a competitive advantage. So look, I think this is one of the best places in the world to be an inventor. I think it is one of the best places in the world to build a start-up business. We now need to make sure that we are one of the best places in the world to scale up a business. And that will be the nature of the decisions that we will be putting to ministers over the course of the weeks to come from our committee. Let me just finish, Madam Deputy Speaker, with this point. The thing that shone through from the statement from the Chancellor today was one thing above all, and it was ambition. Ambition for the future of this country, a confidence in the future of this country. That is why one of the most important numbers that we will read in the OBR forecast today is the fact that business investment is not flat, not falling, it's soaring. It is set to soar by £6 billion over the course of the forecast period. That ambition for this country is a sharp contrast to the amnesia of the party opposite, and that is because we on this side of the House know how futures are really built.
The speaking limit's on our 8 minutes, and I call Dave Dugan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Right Honourable Member for Birmingham, Hodge Hill and Solihull for a fascinating lecture on amnesia, dripping with irony given the last role he had in government. I wish to congratulate the Chancellor on delivering what is almost certainly her final budget. There is no conceivable way that she can remain in post either politically and certainly not economically for a further year. Businesses, workers, bill payers, farmers, hospices, industry and the public sector cannot endure another cycle of this Chancellor. It's just over a year since she stood at that dispatch box delivering her first budget and boasted that she had made the right choices. Well, if only anyone outside the real economy believed that, we wouldn't be in this situation right now. She promised to restore stability to the public finances, and she promised to drive down growth right across the country. She told us that growth would be her central budget mission, but last month the IMF forecast that UK will have the lowest per capita growth in the G7 next year at just 0.5% compared to an average of 1.4% for advanced economies. Labour promised to turn the page on high food prices, but households see food inflation running out of control and hitting 4.9% last month. The Chancellor promised more jobs to tackle poverty, but this month unemployment hit 5%, the highest level since the pandemic, while poverty is now at record levels. Government borrowing stands at a 5-year high, £17.4 billion in October alone, with Labour spending double the defence budget every year just servicing the UK's chronic national debt. And the OECD have downgraded the UK's economic prospects, singling out the Chancellor's policies as exposing the economy to significant downside risk. This gloomy prognosis isn't born just from the SNP's analysis as well, however. Just listen to the Chancellor. She spent the last 18 months insisting that the economy is in a terrible state, while blaming everyone and everything except herself and misunderstanding what negativity her musings signal to investor confidence. It's as though she forgets she is the Chancellor, as yet another stream of consciousness resonates invariably negatively around the economy. She's blamed the black hole, yes, the one the SNP told Labour about before the election, and which she pretended to only discover upon entering number 10. She blamed the markets for their focus on her fiscal rules. Couldn't make that up. And she's blamed Brexit despite herself voting to trigger Article 50. But it's not just about the fundamental economic incompetence of the Chancellor. It's not even just about Labour's inheritance, which, whilst bad, wasn't the cause of this malaise. This crisis remains a product of the Chancellor's catastrophic decision, and she will own it. Just as she will own Labour's compound fiscal bonfire, she is in the frame for one of the most chaotic preludes to any budget in living memory. Andy Haldane, former chief economist of the Bank of England, called this a circus of speculation around the budget, with endless leaks, U-turns and media trails that created panic in the economy, and which Mr Haldane also added has without doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, contributed to weaker than expected economic growth within the UK. There was nothing meaningful in here on energy. The measures on energy bills are a start, but they don't fulfil Labour's election promise to reduce bills by £300, and bills are set to rise in January and again in April. £150 of energy bills, Madam Deputy Speaker, will still leave the Labour Party in debt of £87 per year on their commitment at the election. And Labour's, give way in a second, the SNP did Labour's job for them with a budget proposal that involved a surcharge on banks that would have created that £300 discount for bill payers, just like Labour promised. I'm very happy to give way to the honourable member if you can tell me when Labour's going to come good on the promise.
Thank you. I do thank him for giving way. Of course, if he takes the time to read our manifesto, which we were elected on in Scotland, that promise was to be met at the end of this Parliament. So we're actually ahead of schedule. And I'm sure he welcomes that. Just like he welcomes the extra 500 million cash terms, extra 500 million in cash, extra 300 million in capital going to Scotland, and a commitment to above inflation budget rises up to 2029. Fantastic, Madam Deputy Speaker, isn't it?
Wow, thank you.
I'm sure the public will be delighted to hear Labour's never, never promise on energy bills. And unlike him, I don't exist on my knees waiting to get patted on the head by Labour ministers on the front bench. I'm off my knees, and the consequentials that we get. The consequentials we get in Scotland are a consequence not of largesse by the Labour Party, but of the taxes that Scottish enterprise creates within this so-called United Kingdom. Nothing here, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the energy profits levy, which is putting North Sea oil and gas into an early grave. As things stand, 42% of firms in the North Sea oil and gas sector forecast revenues for 2026 expected to come out from outside the UK's continental shelf. An analysis earlier this month from the Fraser of Islander Institute showed that the industry is undergoing an accelerated decline. In my view, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a direct result of this Labour government who don't understand energy or the economy. This is Scotland's reality within the so-called Union. Our future and our natural endowments decided upon by Westminster ministers rather than the people of Scotland. It must really stick in the craw, especially of Scottish MPs, when they come down here to toe the party line and see the difference that Scotland has had under the SNP since 2007. SNP GDP in Scotland per person has grown by 10.2% compared to 6.8% in the UK. Productivity has grown in Scotland at a rate of 0.9% per year compared to 0.3% per year in the UK, and Scotland attracted 135 foreign direct investment projects in 2024, maintaining our position as the top performing part of the UK in that regard. They're not so keen on the facts. And Scottish Labour MPs jump up and down about the new minimum wage, despite the fact that their constituents and mine are already on more than that as a result of the Scottish living wage at £13.45. And there was little today to suggest that Labour grasps the severity of the cost of living crisis, which for many people feels endless. Inflation has almost doubled under Labour, and food prices are up a staggering 37% over the last 5 years. People are rightly asking, what is going to sort this? Well, I can assure them it's not Labour. And on the two-child cap, I'm very pleased to see that it's gone and taken with it the appalling rape clause. It's just a shame that all the Labour MPs that were cheering the Chancellor when she announced that today didn't vote with the SNP in September 2024 when we tried to get that removed in our motion. Rank hypocrisy. Businesses in the last year are now in the position of surviving, trying to survive this Labour government rather than trying to thrive and invest. Businesses know that this Chancellor doesn't understand business. Family-owned businesses feel this most acutely, and farm businesses know that the Labour Party is out to get them. Today's announcements will not repair the damage to the reality that exists for many businesses, and it's already too late for some. Whisky duty going up again, Madam Deputy Speaker. The SWA said hiking duty today for the third time in 2 years limits Scotch whisky's ability to generate growth and will have a direct consequence for investment and for jobs. This Chancellor has run out of road with businesses across these aisles. Last year, after 40 billion of tax rises, most of that on jobs, she promised that she's not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. This government has taken the hard decisions as a result, and we won't have to do a budget like this again. 12 months later, here we are again. Another round of tax rises, and let me make a prediction. 12 months from now, we'll be back here once more, albeit with a different Chancellor. Today's budget supports the view taxes are up, borrowing's up, cost of living is up, cost of energy is up, and spending is up, but growth is down. The central, let me remind the House, aim of the Chancellor. Scotland deserves better than this Westminster version of Groundhog Day, and fortunately, the people of Scotland will be in a position to choose that in May's elections. Thank you.
Catherine McKinnell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would normally extend the courtesy of saying it's an honour to follow the Honourable Gentleman, but I have to say that speech was all a bit dreeked. And I've reflected hard on this budget, as it's the first since I left my role in the government as Minister for School Standards, and as the first Labour Minister for 14 years, focusing relentlessly on more teachers in classrooms, more support for struggling schools, pay rises that teachers deserve, an inclusive school system, and curriculum reform to transform the life chances of every child. And believe me, I would have given anything to have found a few million, or indeed a few billion, behind the government sofa if there were the chance to of making some of those decisions. And I suspect the Chancellor knows exactly how that feels over the last few weeks. But that is one of the reasons why I've now joined the Public Accounts Committee, scrutinising public spending, drawing on those experiences of making those tough decisions in government about how we spend the public's money. And I've really enjoyed the deep dives we've done, examining how public services are delivered, where schemes fail, making sure lessons are learned, and making sure we spend every pound the best way possible. And just last week we looked at clerical negligence, an area with a staggering £60 billion of public accumulated liabilities. And we have a golden opportunity to cut those costs and deliver better care at the same time. So I would encourage the Chancellor to read our report when it lands, because it might come in handy for next year's budget. And in the meantime, I also wanted to thank the Chancellor for her comments on the... Oh, I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for taking an intervention. I wonder whether she would agree with me that the cost of clinical negligence claims in maternity services is now greater than the cost of maternity services.
I absolutely share those concerns, and I know the Right Honourable Member for Godalming and Ash is also very keen. So I think we have cross-party interest across the House in making better use of these resources. I also wanted to thank the Chancellor for her comments in relation to the infected blood contamination scheme, which is proudly delivered from my constituency in Newcastle North. And I know the team there are incredibly proud of the work that they are doing, and they will be proud of the announcement the Chancellor made today. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, working people in Newcastle are really feeling worn down by the cost of living. We know everybody is feeling the squeeze. It's relentless and it's grinding. And I know the Chancellor knows that too, and has sought to deliver in this budget on that promise of a better life for a hard day's work. And I see there are many measures in this budget that will deliver on that. The freeze and rail fares, the extending of the bus fare cap, the measures on fuel duty, frozen prescription charges and household energy bills cut. And I also know that the Chancellor cares deeply about children trapped in poverty, and too often in families that are working hard and doing their best. And I saw those stories firsthand on the government's Child Poverty Task Force. The driving force behind the crisis is the two-child limit. In the North East alone, we see tens of thousands of children living in poverty that will be lifted out of that by the announcement today. It is both economically foolish and morally wrong. It's why charities and businesses in the North East have been calling for it to be scrapped, because poverty comes at a price. It comes at a price in NHS bills, in educational failure and in wasted potential. So I strongly welcome the Chancellor's decision to scrap the limit today. I'm afraid I can't give way because the time will keep running. But this is just a start, and it has to be in the context of wider welfare reforms that make sure that every child grows up in a home where work pays and where families can thrive. And that mention of home brings me to council tax. In Newcastle, it's felt as a deep-rooted inequality, because I looked up just yesterday 2 properties for sale. A lovely 5-bedroom house in Newcastle Great Park, £420,000 for 1,600 square foot, and a Grade 2 listed former church in Knightsbridge, 7 bedrooms, 12,000 square foot, and a swimming pool, and selling for £35 million. And if I ask my constituents who should pay more council tax, it's pretty obvious.
He's a sexist man alive, but Jamie about me just a sexist man in Croydon. I know those are some pronunciations. That was that's cool. It's a good offer.
You go fast. You go fast. I'm tired. I'm doing quite well at FPL this year. I've really I'm going to wild card, I'm going to free hit this week because I got 3 Arsenal players and I got 3 Chelsea players and I don't want to give that stuff. Can I text you with some so you can give me some? It's been a weird year, hasn't
Yeah. It is. The network is away 39
all right, okay, sorry.
Yeah, you get to be that sexy and nervous at the same time.
This is like normally you have no work, so you're trying to work out what solutions are.
You've never in your life done this question. I've definitely
He was quite funny.
I'm gonna go again. You know, I'm gonna go now. Be looking up. I'll put it back.
Are you all right?
Good afternoon, everybody. And I delivered my budget earlier today, and it was a budget to cut the cost of living, to cut the debt and borrowing, and crucially to cut NHS waiting lists. And that's why I'm really pleased to be here this afternoon with people that make that happen, the nurses, the doctors, all the staff here at the hospital. And I want to say a big thank you to everything that you do. And I know that Kia and Wes said it to you earlier, but you know, you really are an inspiration, and to be able to come and see where that money is going, it is really, really important to me as we put the money into those new neighbourhood health centres and the new technology to use in the NHS to support patients, but also give you the tools that you need to do their job. I think we're going to take a few questions now from the media. Gemma, a few months ago, I promised that Look North would get the first question post-budget, and I'm going to deliver on my word, Gemma. So I'll talk directly to the people of West Yorkshire, especially Leeds.
Yes, well, it's good to see you keep a promise, Chancellor. I was talking to people on the high street in Pudsey yesterday in your constituency, and it won't surprise you, they are really struggling with the cost of living. They see the price of things go up and up and up, and wages haven't kept pace with it. Businesses are still reeling after measures in last year's budget, and today extending that freeze on income tax thresholds will really hit working people. So when you're back up north, what will you say to your constituents? Can you look them in the eye and say things are going to get better because of the budget?
So for people in Leeds West and Pudsey, and people all around the country, in Yorkshire and beyond, there will be a reduction of £150 in your energy bills from April next year. That is tangible difference, money in the pockets of working people. And in addition to that, we're freezing NHS prescription charges. We're freezing train fares. So if you're getting on the train in Bramley or in New Pudsey, it's going to be a bit cheaper than it would have been next year. And we're doing all of those things because I know that the cost of living is still a real challenge for people, day to day, week to week, month to month. And that's why in this budget, I am taking direct action to tackle the cost of living. But also, if you are being seen at LGI or St James's Hospital, or going to your GP surgery in Armley or Bramley, then also people will know that we're putting money into our NHS and those new neighbourhood health centres to take the pressure off the hospitals and have people treated closer to home. Next question, Shahad.
Chancellor, there was a lot of pressure on you and your government in the lead up to this budget. Plenty of backbenchers have expressed frustration and anger. In this budget, you have scrapped the two-child benefit cap, which has meant that some of them are quite happy. Do you think you've done enough to appease all of them?
My focus in the budget is on the country and the people who elected us into government last July. I know that the number one concern for people is the cost of living, which is why we've taken £150 off of people's bills by removing some of those levies and the eco scheme, which has been an utter failure, and using that money to cut people's bills. But I'm just chatting here to some of the nurses and other staff at the hospital. The two-child limit and getting rid of that has a benefit beyond those families, because so many patients who end up in hospital, so many kids who end up in hospital are there because of respiratory conditions, because they may be in poor quality temporary accommodation. The cost to local councils of that, but also the cost to the NHS. And in our schools as well, when I talk to teachers, especially in primary schools, about kids coming into school not ready to learn because of the conditions at home, whether that's a cold house or not enough food to eat. So getting rid of the two-child limit is about addressing child poverty and also reducing some of those costs on other parts of the system, including in our NHS and in our schools. Beth.
Thank you. Chancellor, today you've announced that you're extending the freeze on tax thresholds. It will raise £8.3 billion. In the budget in 2024, you said extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people. It would take more money out of their pay slips. I am keeping every single promise on tax I made in our manifesto. I say to working people, I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT. I will not increase your income tax. Today you've just broken your manifesto pledges and your promise to millions of workers. In the budget last year you would not extend the threshold. How in good conscience can you stay on in your job?
In the manifesto, we were very clear. It was the rates of income tax, national insurance and VAT. But I'm not going to get into semantics. I recognise that we are asking people to contribute more by freezing those allowances. They were already frozen by the previous government from 2021 to 2028, and we're freezing them for a further 3 years. And I do recognise that I was asking ordinary people to pay a little bit more. But I've managed to keep that contribution as low as I possibly can by closing loopholes and asking those with the broadest shoulders to pay more. That's why there will be a surcharge on properties worth more than 2 million. It's why we're increasing taxes on savings, dividends and property income. And it's why as well we're getting a grip of some of the waste and inefficiency in the welfare budget by taking luxury cars out of Motability, more face-to-face assessments for disability benefits, so we keep that contribution from working people as low as possible. And this year and in the years going forward, we're taking £150 a year off of people's energy bills for all families, working families and pensioners, and we're able to do that by taking those levies off of people's bills.
Can you just acknowledge you've broken a manifesto pledge? Because you have. The IFS have said you have.
Well, if you read the manifesto, we're very clear. We say the rates of income tax, national insurance and VAT. But if you are asking, does this have a cost for working people, I acknowledge it does. I said that in the budget last year. I'm not going to pretend otherwise today, but I do think that is the right decision in the circumstances we face. The OBR have today revised down their estimates of productivity and growth by 0.3 percentage points. They say that that will take out £16 billion of tax revenue we would otherwise have brought in. And they are very clear that is not because of any decision that this government has taken in the last 16 months. It is what's happened in the previous 14 years. Brexit, the pandemic, and frankly the austerity and chaos from the previous government. And we're all having to pay a price to that. And it's my job to make sure that the numbers add up so that we can ensure we grow our economy, keep interest rates falling and keep inflation down as well. Joe.
Chancellor Joe Pike, BBC News. The income tax threshold freeze will see millions of people paying more tax while at the same time benefits are being increased. Is that really fair to working people? And a second question, if I may, when did you find out that the OBR had unveiled your budget before you had?
So, as I've already said to Beth, I do recognise that freezing the income tax and national insurance thresholds for a further 3 years after the Conservatives froze them for 7 years does mean that we're asking people to pay a little bit more. We're freezing them from 2028 and we are putting money in people's pockets now by taking money off their energy bills. And that is the right thing to do because it helps bring down inflation and helps people now when I know that the cost of living is still a real challenge. And in answer to your question around the OBR publishing my budget before I delivered it, I found out when I was in the chamber. Paul.
Hello, Chancellor. Look, the OBR says that you will take on the £6 billion a year cost for special educational needs, but you provided no explanation as to where this money is going to come from. So a school is going to have to stump up the huge amounts of cash themselves, or will you guarantee that per pupil spending on your watch will not go down?
So for the next 2 years, and I set this out very clearly in the spending review, we've extended the statutory override for local authorities and we absorbed that money in the spending review. Bridget Phillipson, the Secretary of State for Education, is reviewing at the moment SEND. That's not about money, that's about creating a system that actually works for kids, their parents, for schools, and she will set out that the results of that early in the new year. I believe that we should, wherever possible, integrate children into mainstream schools. That's not always possible, but I would like to see that happening more. But it'll be up to Bridget to set out those reforms. But as I say, we have extended the statutory override for the next 2 years, and we put more money into the schools budget in the spending review just before the summer. Lewis from ITV Digital.
Hello, Chancellor. You are raising minimum wage, which sounds like good news, but we've got an unemployment problem in this country. And you are freezing national insurance thresholds for employers. So isn't that just going to stop businesses from hiring people and drive up unemployment?
Well, we've increased the national minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds from £10 to £10.85 an hour, and we've increased the main rates of the national living wage from £12.21 to £12.71 an hour, giving a pay rise to I think around 2.5 million of the lowest paid people in our country. And that is the right thing to do, because if you go out to work every day, you should be able to pay the bills and put food on the table and pay the rent or the mortgage. But we know that that's still not the reality for many people today, and we're still not paying the minimum wage and the national living wage is still not the rates of a real living wage that is calculated independently. So I think it's the right thing to do, to increase those rates, to put more money in people's pockets. And actually the biggest concern I think for businesses is that consumers don't have enough money in their pockets, and so they're not spending on the discretionary things, whether that's a meal out, a night out, a weekend away with the family, or spending in the local high street and the local shops. So putting more money in the pockets of working people, I think is good economic policy, as well as the right thing to do by some of the poorest people in our country. I'll take a couple more questions. Ryan?
Chancellor, you said that you wouldn't increase taxes on working people, but we know today that the benefits bill up by 9 billion, asylum accommodation costs also up. Are working people, like the people stood behind you, are they paying the price for your failure to deal with particularly the benefits bill?
We're not going to leave the welfare system unchanged. Under the previous government, in the last 5 years of the Conservative government, spending on welfare increased by 1 percentage point of GDP, equivalent to £88 billion. The OBR, I think their forecast showed that as a share of GDP, welfare spending will be broadly flat, but the system's not working, it's broken. I made some reforms today so that if you live abroad, you can't pay nominal amounts of money to access the state pension, more face-to-face assessments for disability benefits, which Mel Stride, when he was working pension secretary, got rid of, reforming Motability so it meets its original purpose of affordable leases for disabled people, not subsidising Mercedes-Benz. And so those sorts of changes are the right things to do. But we also today have introduced funding for the youth guarantee, which means that a young person will be guaranteed either a place at college, an apprenticeship or personalised support. And if after 18 months they haven't got into work, they will be guaranteed a job but not the benefits. And that again is an important reform to help deal with the issue of too many young people not in education, employment or training. And on welfare, you know, we've already managed to claw back money from the contract signed by the previous Tory government, and I think we've managed to claw back something like £70 million, and we're going to phase out the use of hotels entirely during the course of this Parliament, saving us money, and that was reflected in the spending review settlement in the summer. So look, we do want to create a welfare system that is actually working, supporting the most vulnerable and empowering people to get back into work, and I want a welfare system that is fair and stops the illegal trafficking of people into this country. Sophie?
Sophie Huskisson from The Mirror. Unison Union have said that freezing income tax thresholds does the opposite of putting more money in working people's pockets. Do you admit that you could have been braver in targeting the wealthiest in Britain?
As I've said, I do recognise that we are asking everyone to make a contribution for the security of our country and the brightness of its future. I said that in the speech today, and I also said in the speech today that I'm not going to pretend that that is not asking for a contribution. The Tories, when they were in office, froze the thresholds and said nothing to see here. I'm being open and honest that that is from 2028. Freezing thresholds for a bit longer, and that does have a cost. But we're putting money now in the pockets of working people with £150 off their bills, money off of rail fares, frozen prescription charges, as well as fully funding the childcare offer of 30 hours of free childcare for preschool children, more free school meals for 500,000 kids whose parents are on universal credit, rolling out universal breakfast clubs at all primary schools. All these things about putting money in the pockets of ordinary working people, as well as the increases in the national minimum wage and the national living wage that are set out today. But look, you can see the distribution analysis tables in the budget documentation that came out today. This is a highly progressive budget. The biggest winners are those on the lowest incomes, and those who were asking to pay more are those with the broadest shoulders, those who have properties worth more than £2 million. The landlord who pays less tax than their tenant. Those are the right things to do, and they're progressive reforms. And because of that, we've managed to keep the contribution from working people as low as possible. Dan, from Politico.
Hello, Chancellor. A lot of the tax rises that more than half of the income to the Treasury from the tax rises you've announced today actually takes effect, sort of comes in after the next general election, in sort of 2030, 2031. Do you think it's credible to suggest that this will definitely happen? And given things are so volatile in politics, will you still be Chancellor then?
I don't think that anything comes in that late, actually. So the freezes are 28, 29 onwards. The council tax surcharge comes in a couple of years' time, as does the other changes. So these are all coming in within this Parliament. When you're making tax reform, it's often not possible to change those rates overnight, and of course the thresholds are towards the end of Parliament because the Tories already froze them. But we're also making savings right now through getting rid of things like police and crime commissioners, reducing the cost of local government with fewer councillors, as well as selling land that the government no longer has a need for. So there are savings we're making right now, as well as asking public services to make efficiency savings worth a further 0.5% from 28-29. So these are, and what you see actually in the forecast is the deficit coming down every single year, because I think it is important to show that we are consolidating. We're not going to be spending more than we can afford, and the IMF, I believe, have confirmed that we have the fastest rate of consolidation of our public finances of any country in the G7. I'm afraid I can do one more. Thank you, Phoebe. She's the real boss. Yeah.
Anna Mihailova, Times Radio. A year ago, after a big tax raising budget, you said you would not be coming back for more taxes. You've just announced £26 billion worth of tax rises, including dragging hundreds of thousands of people into basic rate income tax, nearly 1 million people into higher rate tax. Can you now tell people, reassure people, you will not be back for more?
Well, look, last year I had to fill the £22 billion black hole in the public finances left by the Conservatives. What we didn't know then, as well as that black hole in the public finances, that actually productivity growth was weaker than the Office of Budget Responsibility then forecast. They've been really clear in their documentation today, available before the budget, that productivity forecast based on the past is now expected to be 0.3 percentage points lower a year. That hits growth to the same amount and reduces tax revenues by £16 billion a year. And although I believe that we can beat those forecasts, we've beat them this year. The OBR said the economy was going to grow by 1% this year. We've grown it by 1.5%. And I'm determined we'll beat the forecasts again. The Conservatives' legacy is not our country's destiny, but we also all know, because we experienced it just 3 years ago, that if you ignore the forecasts, you pay a huge price in the cost of government borrowing, and then by implication the cost of borrowing for ordinary families through their mortgages. We've had 5 cuts in interest rates since I became Chancellor of the Exchequer, taking an average of £1,200 off a new mortgage. I am not going to risk the instability that we had under the Conservatives with our public finances or family finances, and that's why I have asked people to pay more. I can't write future budgets, but if you are asking, is this a budget I wanted to deliver today? Well, I would have rather the circumstances were different. But as Chancellor, I don't get to choose my inheritance, and I have to live in the world as it is, not the one that I might like it to be. And I believe that I made the fair and the necessary choices given the fiscal circumstances. I'm afraid that's all that I'm sorry. I think that's all that we've got time for this afternoon. But thank you very much, everybody, for coming along, and thank you particularly for the staff here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
happy with the swap?
Let me know when you're ready to do this.
Hello? Oh, yes. Eugene, right. How are
We're going to do 6-7 months with the Prime Minister. Yes, because I've got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, so I said that I was going to make a joke about it in the chamber though.
She's changing her voice now.
Getting rid of these ones.
working classes pay.
Commerce and the Confederation of British Industry. It is this Labour government that has invested in nuclear power, in Sizewell C and in Culham. We are taking forward our commitment to slash electricity prices for thousands of manufacturing businesses, as Make UK and many others have called for. And today I'm pleased to welcome John Finkelton's report, an ambitious plan to cut the red tape that has tied our nuclear industry in knots for decades. And within 3 months, we will set out our plan for delivering his recommendations. We are proud of our industrial heritage, and we are determined to build the industry of the future, so that we buy, make and sell more here in Britain. That's why, as we increase defence spending, we are investing in Portsmouth, in Barrow and in Plymouth. And I'm pleased to be supporting Team Derby, an initiative to drive growth in one of our defence industry hubs. It's why we stepped in to save British Steel in Scunthorpe and invested in Sheffield Forge Masters. And it's why we've changed government procurement, so we can buy British when it is crucial to our national security. For steel, for shipbuilding, and today for AI, driving innovation and building that great industry here in Britain. But it's not just what we invest that matters, it's how we invest. Putting money and power back in the hands of local and regional leaders. Today, we are devolving £13 billion of flexible funding for 7 mayors to invest in skills, business support and infrastructure. I'm extending the business rates retention pilots in the West of England, Liverpool City region and Cornwall until 2029. I'm providing £30 million for the Kernow Industrial Growth Fund for sectors like critical minerals and marine innovation. I am establishing the Leeds City Fund, a long-term agreement to retain business rates to fund local regeneration projects like the development of Leeds South Bank, and I am allocating £20 million for the new Peterborough Sports Quarter and £16 million for a science centre in Darlington from the Growth Mission Fund. The benefits of investment the benefits of investment and growth must be built and felt in every part of our United Kingdom. So we are providing an additional £370 million for the Northern Ireland Executive, £505 million for the Welsh Government and £820 million for the Scottish Government over the spending review period through the Barnett formula. And I am making... Sorry, I didn't quite catch that from the SNP. Did they not? Perhaps, Madam Deputy Speaker, they didn't hear. £820 million for the Scottish Government over the spending review period because Anna Sawa asked us to. And I'm making targeted investments in our industrial strategy sectors across the UK. In Northern Ireland, I am providing £17 million to support businesses and strengthen the UK internal market, and backing advanced manufacturing through the Northern Ireland Enhanced Investment Zone. Wales will be the host for 2 AI growth zones, creating more than 8,000 jobs, supported by a £10 million investment in the semiconductors critical for that industry. And we are building the UK's first small modular nuclear reactors with Rolls-Royce at Wilfer in Anglesey. 2 Labour governments working together in Wales to deliver for the people of Wales. And in Scotland, I'm committing over £14 million for low-carbon technologies in Grangemouth, £20 million to renew infrastructure at Inch Green in Inverclyde, and £20 million to redevelop Kirkcaldy Town Centre and Seafront, with construction starting next year. And that's on top of the UK's biggest ever warship export deal with the Norwegian government to build frigates in Glasgow. Supporting 4,000 jobs. Investment opposed by the SNP. Jobs opposed by the SNP. Defence opposed by the SNP. But secured by this Labour government. A growing economy needs strong foundations of economic stability, with borrowing, inflation down and investment up. That is good for business, and it is good for working people, so they have more money in their pockets. Economic stability, safeguarded by ironclad fiscal rules, is our best defence against rising prices and the best way to improve living standards. We've all seen the alternative. 3 years ago, in their clamour to cut taxes for the richest, the Tories under Liz Truss crashed the economy and sent mortgage rates spiralling and brought pensions to the brink. They're being so loud, Madam Deputy Speaker, and yet I can't even hear them now. Now, I know that the leader of the Green Party is a keen hypnotherapist, and he believes that he can achieve remarkable things using only the power of his mind. Unfortunately, the only things getting bigger under his approach would be the deficit and the rate of inflation. And for all the damage that the Conservative cuts did to our schools and our hospitals, they also doubled the national debt. Our net financial debt this year will be £2.6 trillion, 83% of GDP, meaning that today, 1 in every £10 that government spends is on debt interest. Not on paying down that debt, but just on paying the interest on the debt that we inherited from the Conservatives. My fiscal rules will get borrowing down while supporting investment. The stability rule, that day-to-day expenditure must be met through tax receipts. And the investment rule, which allows me to increase investment whilst getting debt on a downward path. Those fiscal rules are non-negotiable. I met them at the budget last year, I met them in the spring, and I have met them today. While the current budget balance is in deficit by £28.8 billion in 26-27 and £4.6 billion in 27-28, it moves into a surplus of £3.9 billion in 28-29, £21.7 billion in 29-30, and £24.6 billion in 2030-31. More than doubling our headroom against the stability rule and meeting that rule a year early too. Yeah. And our net financial debt is 83.3% in 26-27, 83.6% in 27-28, 83.7% in 28-29, falling to 83.0% in 29-30 and 82.2% in 2030-31. Madam Deputy Speaker, I said we would cut the debt, and we are, with debt down by the end of the forecast. And going forwards, to support our commitment to a single fiscal event and further strengthen our economic stability, I will follow the recommendations of the International Monetary Fund by assessing the fiscal rules just once a year at the budget. Despite the challenges we face on productivity, the path of our deficit reduction remains broadly the same as in spring. Public sector net borrowing is due to be £112.1 billion, or 3.5% of GDP in 26-27, 3% in 27-28, 2.6% in 28-29, 1.9% in 29-30, and 1.9% in 2030-31, ending at £67.2 billion. Translating into an increase in the net cash requirement next year of £4.2 billion, taking the total to £133.3 billion. According to the IMF, we are due to reduce borrowing more over the rest of this Parliament than any other G7 economy. The Conservatives crashed the economy, we are protecting it. The Conservatives lost control of debt, we are getting debt down. The Conservatives let inflation and interest rates go through the roof. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, since Labour took office, the Bank of England have cut interest rates 5 times. I've made my choices. Not reckless borrowing, not dangerous cuts, but stability for our economy, security for our public finances, and security for family finances too. Those are the Labour choices. Madam Deputy Speaker, Tory austerity left classrooms crumbling and waiting lists sky high, weakened our productivity and choked our economic growth. And now they propose a further £47 billion of cuts to our public services. Well, that is equivalent to cutting every police officer in our country twice over. And then there is Reform, who promise more than £100 billion of cuts with no details of where those cuts will come from or who will pay for them. A recipe for devastating damage to our public services. People voted for Labour because they wanted roads that aren't full of potholes. They want police on our streets and they want an NHS that is there when they need it. And we're delivering that. Waiting lists down by 230,000. And not just the 2 million additional appointments we promised, but an additional 5.2 million appointments already delivered since the general election. I joined the Labour Party almost 30 years ago because I could see that the Conservative government that I grew up under didn't care much about schools like mine. Textbooks were rationed. I know that many of you weren't at schools like mine.
There is far too much noise, far too much excitement. People need to calm down a little. Chancellor.
They don't want to hear what the Tories did to schools like mine, but I will tell them. Textbooks rationed, libraries closed, kids herded into porta cabins in the playground, and I came into politics to change that. The money that I allocated at the spending review will fix the crumbling classrooms that the Conservatives left behind and build the schools that they promised but never delivered. And today, thanks to representations from my honourable friends, the members for Wolverhampton North East and Leeds South West and Morley, I will provide £5 million for libraries in secondary schools, building on the £10 million commitment to ensure that every primary school has a school library within this Parliament. And thanks to representations from my honourable friends, the members for Bournemouth East and from Luton North, I am providing £18 million to improve and upgrade playgrounds across England. Madam Deputy Speaker, let there be no doubt that this is a government that is on the side of our kids and who will back their potential. I will not allow the legacies of Conservative neglect to stain our society. Last year, I made changes to the Mine Workers Pension Scheme to ensure that its members receive the fair pensions that they are owed. This year, with thanks to the Minister for Pensions for all his work in this subject, I can go further. I have heard representations from Labour Coalfield MPs, including my honourable friends, the members for Bassetlaw, Blyth and Ashington, Barnsley South, Mansfield and Llanelli. And today I can announce that I will transfer the Investment Reserve Fund of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme to its members. The men and the women who worked in our coal industry get a fair deal in their retirement too. And more. Having heard representations from my honourable friends, the members for Banbury and the member for Edinburgh South West, I will index for inflation on pensions accrued before 1997 in the Pension Protection Fund and the Financial Assurance Scheme, so that people whose pension schemes became insolvent, no fault of their own, no longer lose out as the result of inflation. Last year, I also provided funding to compensate the victims of the infected blood scandal, after the previous government failed to budget for the costs of compensation. This year, I have listened to representations from my honourable friend, the member for Eltham and Chislehurst, and my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West. And I'd like to thank the Minister for Employment for her representations over many years on this subject. As a result, I will exempt all payments from the infected blood scheme from inheritance tax, regardless of the circumstances in which those payments are passed down. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is how we should be spending taxpayers' money, on dealing with injustices and building strong public services, not on waste and inefficiency. At the spending review, I set an ambitious target of £14 billion of efficiencies per year by 2029, and I am grateful to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury for driving that work forward, realising savings through AI and automation, and by scrapping NHS England and reducing back office staff by 18,000. At this budget, I will find a further £4.9 billion of efficiencies by 2031, getting and selling government assets that we no longer have any use for. These savings will be required across government, but for our National Health Service, I will reinvest all of these savings back into the care that people rely on. More nurses, more GPs, more appointments. Restoring the services that faltered under years of Conservative decline and investing in the future of our National Health Service. And today I am announcing £300 million of investment in technology to improve patient service and 250 new neighbourhood health centres. Expanding more services into communities so that people can receive treatment outside of hospitals and get better, faster care where they live. Over 100 of these will be delivered by 2030, including in Birmingham, Truro and Southall. The Labour Party founded our National Health Service, and we will renew our National Health Service. I will take the same approach for defence spending that I take to NHS spending, reinvesting savings back into our national security. In our age of insecurity, Britain will continue to stand with our allies, working in collaboration to secure a sustainable ceasefire for Ukraine, and maintaining our commitment to NATO, with the UK set to spend 2.6% of GDP on defence by April 2027. Madam Deputy Speaker, the public rightly expects that we stamp out fraud, error and waste, and put that money to good use in our schools and our hospitals and other frontline services. My right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has already announced that she will claw back excess profits from the use of hotels to house asylum seekers, as we phase out the use of those hotels entirely. And we will consult on reforms to indefinite leave to remain and access to taxpayer-funded benefits. The introduction of digital ID will break the link between illegal migration and illegal working. And the HMRC and the Fair Work Agency will crack down on illicit businesses that blight our high streets and undercut illegitimate firms, enforcing the minimum wage, investigating dodgy businesses, and increasing scrutiny of the gig economy, as well as tracking down fraudulent business owners who vanish without paying their taxes. And I'd like to thank my honourable friends, the members for Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, Lee and Atherton, and Kensington and Bayswater for their representations on this subject. And I'll take further steps to prevent and track down unpaid tax, which will together, these reforms will raise nearly £10 billion a year by 2030, including through new powers for HMRC to pursue the promoters of tax avoidance schemes. I am building on our successful use of targeted checks on welfare claims to root out fraud and error and prevent public money being paid to people who are not entitled to it. And I would like to thank Tom Hayhoe, the COVID Corruption Commissioner, for his work in helping to chase down nearly £400 million from dodgy pandemic spending and contracts. contracts handed out by Tory ministers to Tory peers and Tory friends. Well, that money belongs in our schools and in our hospitals.
It is so noisy now, we can barely hear the Chancellor. Everybody needs to calm down. Chancellor.
Well, I wouldn't want any honourable member to miss this. So we are chasing down that money, and we've got almost £400 million back from dodgy pandemic spending and contracts. Tory contracts handed out by Tory ministers to Tory peers and Tory donors. Well, that money belongs in our schools and in our hospitals, and we are getting that money back. Deputy Speaker, we are ramping up sanctions on Russia, and we are freezing known Russian assets. But let me be clear, I don't actually mean the honourable member for Clacton. Under the Conservatives...
Order. You don't need commentary from the backbenches, and Mr. Dewhurst, you are so loud. It's remarkable how far your voice carries. Chancellor.
Under the Conservatives, the cost of our welfare system increased by nearly 1 percentage point of GDP, equivalent to £88 billion in just 5 years. The broken welfare system that we inherited wrote off millions of people as too sick to work. And we will reform that system so that it is a system that does not count the cost of failure, but one that protects people who cannot work and empowers those who can. We have brought back face-to-face assessments for disability benefits. Those are the face-to-face assessments that the Shadow Chancellor got rid of when he was Work and Pension Secretary. And our changes to universal credit will get 15,000 people back into work, a figure confirmed today. The former Health Secretary, Alan Milburn, will review the causes of rising youth inactivity, and we are already taking action. I'm grateful to the Federation of Small Businesses and Small Business Britain for their representations on apprenticeships. And today I am announcing funding to make the training for under 25 apprenticeships completely free for small and medium-sized enterprises. And funding our new youth guarantee, providing £820 million over the next 3 years to give young people who are let down by the Conservatives the support and the opportunity that they deserve. Guaranteeing every young person a place in college, an apprenticeship or personalised job support. And after 18 months, 18 to 21-year-olds will be offered paid work, not benefits. The Motability Scheme was set up to protect the most vulnerable, not to subsidise the lease on a Mercedes-Benz. And so I am making reforms that will reduce generous taxpayer subsidies, and Motability have confirmed that they will remove luxury vehicles from their scheme, getting the scheme back to its original purpose of offering cost-effective leases to disabled people. And taxpayers' money should not be spent on pensions for people abroad, who only lived here for a couple of years and may never even have paid a penny in tax. The Conservatives allowed thousands of people living abroad to buy their way into the state pension for as little as £3.50 a week, debasing the purpose of our pension system. And so I will abolish access to Class 2 voluntary national insurance contributions for people living abroad, increasing the time that someone has to live or work in Britain to 10 years and increasing the contributions that they must pay. These reforms improve our welfare system. They support our young people, protect those who need it most, and put an end to Conservative waste and unfairness. Madam Deputy Speaker, to break the cycle of austerity, we need a fair and a sustainable tax system, one that generates revenues to fund the public services that we all use, and supports investment to grow our economy. That does mean that today I am asking everyone to make a contribution. The previous Conservative government froze personal tax thresholds from 2021 to 2028. And today I will maintain all income tax and equivalent national insurance thresholds at their current lady supported these freezes when her party made them. She might want to forget about it, but the British people never will. At the same time, we are ensuring that people only in receipt of the basic or new state pension do not have to pay small amounts of tax through simple assessment from April 2027. I will also keep the Plan 2 student loan repayments threshold at its 2026-27 level for 3 years. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that maintaining these thresholds is a decision that will affect working people. I said that last year, and I won't pretend otherwise now. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am asking everyone to make a contribution, but I can keep that contribution as low as possible, because I will make further reforms to our tax system today to make it fairer and to ensure that the wealthiest contribute the most. The Conservatives knew that our tax system didn't work. Time and time again, they ducked the necessary reforms, leaving a system unfit for a changing economy, with unfairness that they refused to address. Currently, a landlord with an income of £25,000 will pay nearly £1,200 less in tax than their tenants with the same salary, because no national insurance is charged on property, dividend or savings income. It's not fair that the tax system treats different types of income so differently. And so I will increase the basic and higher rate of tax on property, savings and dividend income by 2 percentage points, and the additional rate of tax on property and savings income by 2 percentage points. Even after these reforms, 90% of taxpayers will still pay no tax at all on their savings. As well as narrowing the gap between the tax on income from assets and income from work, I also believe that a fair society is one where the wealthiest pay their fair share. The reforms I made last year will raise an additional £8 billion a year by 2020-30 from wealth. I increased taxes last year on private equity, private schools and private jets. I abolished the non-dom tax regime. And this year, I will make 2 changes to cap trust charges and prevent avoidance. I reformed inheritance tax on agricultural and business assets. And this year, I am aligning those reforms with wider inheritance tax rules by allowing the transfer of the 100% relief allowance between spouses, balancing the taxation of these valuable assets with the realities of family life. In this budget, I will take further steps to deal with a long-standing source of wealth inequality in our country. A Band D home in Darlington or Blackpool pays just under £2,400 in council tax, nearly £300 more than a £10 million mansion in Mayfair. And so, from 2028, I am introducing the high-value council tax surcharge in England, an annual £2,500 charge for properties worth more than £2 million, rising to £7,500 for properties worth more than £5 million. This will be collected alongside council tax, levied on owners, and we will consult on options for support or deferral. This new surcharge will raise over £400 million by 2031 and will be charged on less than the top 1% of properties. Madam Deputy Speaker, reliefs in our tax system cost the taxpayer billions of pounds a year. but many of them no longer serve their original purpose. The government rightly provides generous tax relief for people paying into a pension, relieving income tax on all contributions and on the investment itself, as well as national insurance relief on employer contributions, at a cost of over £70 billion a year to the Exchequer. This budget makes no changes to those reliefs or to the tax-free lump sum. But salary sacrifice for pensions, which was intended to be a small part of our pension system, is forecast to almost treble in cost to other taxpayers from £2.8 billion in 2017 to £8 billion by 2030, with the greatest benefit going to the highest earners, or to those in the financial services sector putting their bonuses into pensions tax-free, while those on the minimum wage or those whose employers don't offer salary sacrifice don't benefit at all. That is not sustainable for our public finances, putting pressure on the tax that everyone else pays. And so I am introducing a £2,000 cap on salary sacrifice into a pension, with contributions above that taxed in the same way as other employee pension contributions. That is a pragmatic step so that people, especially on low and middle incomes, can continue to use salary sacrifice for their pension without paying any more in tax than they do now, and to give individuals and employers time to adjust to these new arrangements. These changes will come into effect in 2029. The coalition government introduced 100% relief from capital gains tax on business sales made to employee ownership trusts, creating a route for gains to go completely untaxed when businesses are sold. I will reduce that relief to 50%, retaining a strong incentive for employee-owned companies. And as we work towards doubling the size of the cooperative economy, the Department for Business and Trade will launch a call for evidence on how we can better support co-ops to grow. Because of the changes that I have made to capital gains tax this year and last year, receipts are forecast to increase from £14 billion this year to £30 billion by 2030. To support our high streets, I am announcing a package of regulatory changes as called for by UK Hospitality and the British Retail Consortium. And I will support the Great British Pub through our new national licensing framework, encouraging councils to back our pubs and to back late-night venues with greater freedoms. For business rates, I will introduce permanently lower tax rates for over 750,000 retail, hospitality and leisure properties, the lowest rates since 1991, paid for through higher rates on properties worth more than £500,000, like the warehouses used by online giants. Alongside this, I will introduce a package of support worth over £4.3 billion over the next 3 years for a property of any size seeing a large increase in their bill. And to support a level playing field in retail, I will stop online firms from undercutting our high street businesses by ensuring customs duty applies on parcels of any value. I will reform our motoring taxes, exempting search and rescue vehicles from vehicle excise duty as called for by my honourable friends, the member for the Western Isles and for Whitehaven and Workington. And because all cars contribute to the wear and tear on our roads, I will ensure that drivers are taxed according to how much they drive and not just by the type of car they own, by introducing the electric vehicle excise duty on electric cars. This will be payable each year alongside vehicle excise duty at 3p per mile for electric cars and 1.5p for plug-in hybrids, helping us to double road maintenance funding in England over the course of this Parliament. And alongside this, I am providing support to boost our British car industry, increasing the threshold for the expensive car supplement on electric vehicles to £50,000, saving over 1 million motorists £440 a year. Providing £1.3 billion additional funding for the electric car grant, extending it to 2030 and taking total funding to £2 billion, as well as delaying changes to the employee car ownership scheme. In addition, we're investing a further £200 million to accelerate the rollout of EV charging, as well as 100% business rates relief for EV charge points for the next decade, with thanks to my honourable friend, the member for Camborne and Redruth, for his representations on this policy. And I will improve competition in our taxi industry by ending ride-hailing companies' use of a discount scheme intended for coach tours, as called for by Steve McNamara, the General Secretary of the Licensed Taxi Drivers Association, legislating to restrict access so that everyone pays fairly and protecting £700 million of tax revenue each year. I am responding to our consultation on landfill tax, and listening to representations, particularly from our house building industry. I will not converge towards a single rate, but I will prevent the gap between the two rates from widening to balance the need to address tax avoidance in the current structure. I will today publish Ray McCann's report into the loan charge along with the government's response, setting out a new settlement opportunity that will finally allow people to finalise their position and draw a line under this long-standing issue. And I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Milton Keynes Central, for her representations on this subject. I will continue with the planned uprating for tobacco duties that I set out last year and uprate alcohol duties by inflation, along with our plans to introduce a vaping products duty in 2026 and changes to the soft drinks industry levy announced by my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, yesterday. And I'd like to thank the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury for his work on all the tax measures in this budget. I will also reform gambling taxes in response to the rise in online gambling. Remote gaming is associated with the highest levels of harm. And so I am increasing remote gaming duty from 21% to 40%. With duty on online betting increasing from 15% to 25%. I am making no change to the taxes on in-person gambling or on horse racing. And I am abolishing bingo duty entirely from April next year. Taken together, my reforms to gambling tax will raise over £1 billion per year by 2031. As a result of the tax reforms I have made today, I can confirm that I will not be increasing national insurance, the basic, higher or additional rates of income tax or VAT. And I have kept everyone's contribution as low as possible through reforms to make our tax system stronger, closing loopholes, ensuring that the wealthiest pay their share, and building a tax system that is fairer for the future as our economy changes. On the day I became Chancellor, I said that I would judge my time in office a success if I knew that ordinary children from working class backgrounds were living more fulfilling lives. Their horizons expanded, their potential realised. I joined the Labour Party, I came into politics because I believe that every child has equal worth and deserves an equal chance to achieve their promise. The biggest barrier to equal opportunity is child poverty. Because for every child that grows up in poverty, our society pays a triple cost. The first and the heaviest is to the child. Going to school hungry, waking up in a cold home, or in another B&B. While other children enjoy the advanced quiet space at home to work in, too many go without. And there is also the cost of supporting a family in poverty, which ends up in the lap of overstretched councils, who can do no more than shunt them into temporary accommodation at huge cost to local taxpayers. Then there is the future cost, to our economy and to our society, of wasted talent, and a welfare system that bears the cost of failure for decades to come. Young people with so much to contribute but whose potential is suffocated early by limited life chances and missed opportunities, struggling to make their way in a society that did not look out for them. I don't intend to preside over a status quo that punishes children for the circumstances of their birth and demands that we all pay 3 times over for it. Since last July, we've rolled out free breakfast clubs in schools. We're expanding free school meals to 500,000 more kids, lifting 100,000 children out of poverty as we do it. We've passed the Renters' Rights Act and we've extended the childcare offer. And I'm proud of all of that. But it's not enough. Because there is one policy that pushes kids into poverty more than any other. It was introduced by the party opposite. They said it would save money and that it would bring about behavioural change, disincentivising poorer families from having more children. Well, even on its own terms, it failed. The welfare bill has continued to rise, and there's been no difference in the size of families. But what it has done is to push hundreds of thousands of children into poverty since it was introduced. They said they were punishing parents' choices, but it's the kids who have paid the price. They've paid the price for the policies of a party which opted for cynical gimmicks over real savings in our welfare system. I understand that many families are finding times hard and that many kids have had to make difficult choices when it comes to having kids. And there are many reasons why people choose to have children and then find themselves in difficult times. The death of a partner, separation, ill health, a lost job. I don't believe that children should have to bear the brunt of that. And neither can I, in good conscience, leave in place the vile policy known as the rape clause, requiring women to prove if their child has been conceived non-consensually to receive support. I'm proud to be Britain's first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. I take the responsibilities that come with that seriously. I will not tolerate the grotesque indignity of women of the rape clause any longer. It is dehumanising, it is cruel, and I will remove it from the statute book. And so because I am tackling fraud and error in our welfare system, because I am cracking down on tax avoidance, because I am reforming gambling taxation, I can announce today, fully costed and fully funded, the removal of the 2-child limit in full from April. This side of the house. It's amazing what people get so angry about, and we've seen their true colours today. The thing they get angry about is lifting children out of poverty.
Order! Our constituents will want to hear the Chancellor.
I think our constituents have heard all they need to from the party opposites today. We on this side of the House do not believe that the solution to a broken welfare system is to punish the most vulnerable. We are lifting 450,000 children out of poverty with the end of the 2-child limit. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, combined with other actions we are taking, this Labour government is achieving the biggest reduction in child poverty over a parliament since records began. That is the difference that this Labour government is making. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know how worried families are about the cost of everything. Worried that their money won't stretch to the end of the month. Worried that price... I think if you've got a house that's worth £5 million a year, you can probably afford it. But you get more exercise about reducing child poverty than you do about the richest paying more. Under this government, wages have risen, by more since we were elected than in 10 years under the last government. With lower interest rates already saving families £1,200 a year off a typical new mortgage, compared to that to when Liz Truss was Prime Minister. But I know that people still face pressure on their budgets day to day and week to week. And where there is more to do, where we can provide relief, we are doing it. Extending the bus fare cap, cracking down on rip-off price hikes, freezing prescription charges, and freezing rail fares for the first time in 30 years. I am increasing the basic and new state pension by 4.8%, an increase of £440 per year for the basic state pension, and an increase of £575 per year for the new state pension, in line with our commitment to the triple lock. At the election, we promised a genuine living wage, and we are delivering it. At the budget last year, I increased the national minimum wage and the national living wage, and I am doing the same this year too. Accepting the recommendations of the Low Pay Commission in full, and increasing the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds from £10 to £10.85 an hour, and increasing the living wage from £12.21 to £12.71 an hour. Under current plans, the temporary 5p cut to fuel duty that was introduced during the pandemic will come to an end in April, and fuel duty will be uprated in line with inflation. But I know that the cost of travelling to and from work is still too expensive. And so I am extending the 5p cut until September 2026. And because I know that changes in wholesale prices are not always passed on to motorists, I am bringing in new rules to mandate petrol forecourts to share real-time price rises through a new fuel finder, empowering drivers to find the cheapest fuel, calling out rip-offs and strengthening competition, saving the average household £40 a year. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the greatest drivers of the rising cost of living is the cost of energy prices. The cause of high energy bills must be tackled at source, and so we are investing in energy security, in nuclear and renewable energy, and in insulation through our Warm Homes Plan. But that's not enough when people are struggling with energy bills today. The Conservatives' Eco Scheme was presented as a plan to tackle fuel poverty. It costs households £1.7 billion a year on their bills. And for 97% of families in fuel poverty, the scheme, get this, has cost them more than it's saved. It is a failed scheme, and so I am scrapping it, along with taking other legacy costs off bills. And as a result, I can tell you today that for every family, we are keeping our promise to get energy bills down and cut the cost of living. With £150 cut from the average household bill from April next year. Money off bills and in the pockets of working people, that is my choice. Not to neglect Britain's energy security like the Tories did. Not to leave working families to bear the brunt of high prices like the Tories did, but to get energy costs down now and in the future. That is the Labour choice. And Madam Deputy Speaker, one more thing. Because of our action on bills and on prices, as a direct result of this budget, the Office for Budget Responsibility confirmed today that inflation is coming down faster and will be a full 0.4 percentage points lower next year. That's the benefit of a Labour government cutting the cost of living. Madam Deputy Speaker, this Labour government is changing our country. In the face of challenges on our productivity, I will grow our economy through stability, investment and reform. I've met my fiscal rules and built our economic resilience for the future. I have asked everyone to contribute, yes, for the security of our country and the brightness of its future. but I have kept that contribution as low as possible by reforming our tax system, making it fairer and stronger for the future. I have protected our NHS, maintaining public investment and driving efficiency in government spending. I have taken action on our broken welfare system, rooting out waste and lifting children out of poverty. And I have cut the cost of living, with money off bills and prices frozen, all while keeping every single one of our manifesto commitments. Those are my choices.
Order. Mr. Rankin, Miss Morton, your voice carries right across the chamber. Right across the chamber. Try and take a breath every so often. Chancellor.
Those are my choices. Not austerity, not reckless borrowing, but cutting the debt, cutting waiting lists, and cutting the cost of living. Those are Labour choices, promised and delivered by this budget, promised and delivered by this Labour government. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Under Standing Order number 51, the first motion entitled Provisional Collection of Taxes must be decided without debate. Will the Chancellor of the Exchequer please move formally? Chancellor, please move formally.
Formally.
The question is that pursuant to Section 5 of the Provisional Collection of Taxes Act 1968, provisional statutory effect shall be given to the following motions. Stamp duty reserve tax, UK listing relief, motion number 60. Rates of tobacco products duty, motion number 65. As many of their opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the motion entitled Income Tax Charge. It is on this motion that the debate will take place today and on the succeeding days. The questions on this motion and on the remaining motions will be put at the end of the budget debate on Tuesday, the 2nd of December. I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer to move the motion formally.
Formally.
The question is that income tax is charged for the tax year 2026-27, and it is declared that it is expedient in the public interest that this resolution should have statutory effect under the provisions of the Provisional Collections of Taxes Act 1968. I now call the Leader of the Opposition. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I congratulate the Right Honourable Lady on delivering her second budget. I hope she enjoyed it, because it really should be her last. Yeah! What a total humiliation. A total humiliation.
Can colleagues who are exiting the chamber do so swiftly so we can focus on the Leader of the Opposition? Swiftly exit, quietly. Right. Leader of the Opposition.
It's a total humiliation, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, she put up taxes by £40 billion, the biggest tax rate in British history. She promised that she wouldn't be back for more. She swore it was a one-off. She told everyone that from now on, it would be stability and she would pay for everything with growth. Today, she has broken every single one of those promises. If she had any decency, she would resign. At the last budget, she said she was proud to be the country's first ever female Chancellor. After this budget, she will go down as the country's worst ever Chancellor. Today...
Order! And the Chief Whip in particular knows that we don't allow clapping in the chamber.
Yeah, resign.
Leader of the Opposition.
Today she has announced a new tax rate of £26 billion. They're all cheering. Household income is down. Spending policies in this budget increase borrowing in every year. That smorgasbord of misery we just heard from her can be summed up in one sentence. Labour are hiking taxes to pay for welfare. This is a budget for Benefit Street, Madam Deputy Speaker, paid for by working people. This budget increases benefits for 560,000 families by an average of £5,000. They are hiking taxes on workers, pensioners and savers to pay for handouts to keep their backbenchers quiet. These are the same, yes, they can chanter all they like. These are the same backbenchers, Madam Deputy Speaker, who cheered last year when she taxed jobs and left more than 100,000 people without an income. They cheered because they didn't understand the consequences of what they were doing, and they still don't. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not been an easy time for the Chancellor. No one liked seeing her sitting on those benches as it dawned on her that her own backbenchers were going to do to her political career what she's done to our economy. But she could have chosen today to bring down welfare spending and get more people into work. Instead, she has chosen to put up tax after tax after tax, taxes on workers, taxes on savers, taxes on pensioners, taxes on investors, taxes on homes, holidays, cars, I think even milkshakes, taxes on anyone doing the right thing. She and this government have lost what little credibility they had left, and no one will ever trust her again. What's amazing, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that she has the nerve to come to this House and claim this is all someone else's fault. A laundry list of excuses. Yes. Madam Deputy Speaker, they blame the Conservatives as if we've been sneaking into the Treasury under the cover of darkness to give pay rises to the unions. She inherited an economy with inflation at 2% and record high employment. She has tanked it in just over a year. Endless excuses. She blames Brexit. She blames Donald Trump. She needs to blame herself. And I've got some news for her. The Chancellor didn't seem to understand what the OBR was saying. Inflation is up, not down, and that inflation was stoked by her tax and spend decisions. The economic fiscal outlook says that they expect inflation to stay higher for longer. Everybody else has read it. She still hasn't read the OBR analysis. She blames higher than expected borrowing costs. Where does she think they came from? Those borrowing costs are driven by her lack of grip. She is paying more, you're saying us, she's paying more to borrow than Greece. She is paying more to borrow than at any point under the 14 years of Conservative government. Perhaps if Labour MPs read a book sometimes, they would know something. That includes an energy crisis, Madam Deputy Speaker. Under us, we had an energy crisis sparked by a war in Ukraine and a global pandemic. What is her excuse? What is her excuse? She is taking the public for fools, but they are under no illusions whose fault this is. The fact is, the bad choices she is making today, choices to break promises, choices to put up taxes, choices to spend more of other people's money, are because of the bad choices she made at the last disastrous budget. If you want growth, you need to start with knowing what kind of country you want to be and make a plan to get there. Create certainty for the people and businesses who will drive growth. There is no growth and no plan because Labour focused on settling scores and scratching the itches they had in opposition. She promised stability, she delivered chaos. Just look at the circus around this budget. First the leaks, then more leaks to try to undo the damage. Calling panicky press conferences, U-turning on her U-turns, rolling the pitch one day only to plough through it the next. She had the cheek to talk about stability, Madam Deputy Speaker. She has become the first Chancellor in history to release the whole budget ahead of time. This is extraordinary. It tells you everything you need to know about her grip on the Treasury. She's making the UK a shambolic laughingstock to international investors, and if she doesn't resign for breaking her promises, she should sure as hell go for this. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, what have we got for all this chaos and disorder? There are 1 million more people claiming universal credit than there were at the time of the last budget. Government spending, up. Welfare spending, up. Universal credit claimants, up. Unemployment, up. Debt interest, up. Inflation, up. And what about the things that you want to go up? What about the things you want to go up? Growth, down. Investment, down. Business confidence, down. The credibility of the Chancellor, and not just down, through the floor. These figures are shocking. Does she really think that anyone will be confused by the sleight of her hand that she had in her speech? Her speech today was an exercise in self-delusion. Today, she had an opportunity to apologize and show some humility. Instead, we've been fed puff pieces in the Times and the FT showing a woman wallowing in self-pity, whining about mansplaining and misogyny. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor. Woman...
Order. Colleagues need to simmer down, most definitely, and just breathe a little and allow the Leader of the Opposition to be heard. Leader of the Opposition.
All we've had is wallowing in self-pity and whining about misogyny and mansplaining. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor, woman to woman. People out there aren't complaining because she's female, they're complaining because she is utterly incompetent. Real equality means being held to the same standard as everyone else. It means being judged on results. Take her bright idea, the Office for Value for Money. It's been closed down because it didn't save a penny. In fact, it cost the taxpayer £1.6 million. You couldn't make this stuff up. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've identified a way to save taxpayers huge amounts of money by sacking just one person, the woman sitting opposite. The ex-chief economist of the Bank of England was not mansplaining. He wasn't mansplaining when he said the uncertainty around today's budget is the single biggest reason growth has flatlined. What did the Chancellor think would happen when she went on breakfast telly to do an emergency public service announcement? I interrupt your Cheerios to bring you this frightening message about income tax. And then, unbelievably, she changed her mind 3 days later. No wonder people are in despair. She says she wants people to respect her.
Order. Conservative colleagues are drowning out the Leader of the Opposition speech, so just be mindful nobody will be able to hear her at home. Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Deputy Speaker, she says she wants people to respect her. Respect is earned. She apparently told Labour MPs this week, I'll show the media, I'll show the Tories, I will not let them beat me. Show us what? Making stuff up at the dispatch box, incompetent, chaos, and the highest tax burden in history. She said to them, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll be there on Wednesday, I'll be there next year, and I'll be back the year after that. God help us. She is spineless, shameless, and completely aimless. Talk to any business. Talk to someone looking for a job. Unemployment is up every single month since Labour have been in office. They don't want to hear it, but it's true. They're shouting and complaining they cannot create jobs. It is the worst year for graduate recruitment on record. Are they proud of this? Companies like Merck and Ineos slashing investment plan.
Order. If you're on the front bench, I can obviously see you, Mr. Kyle. And there's no need for you to be chuntering this loud. They can see and hear you as well. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. They don't want to hear the truth, but I'm speaking for all of those people out there who are sick of this government. Companies like Merck and Ineos are slashing investment plans. The construction sector has shrunk. How is that house building target going, by the way? I'll tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, they are miles behind and won't even come close to what we achieved. Business confidence is at record lows. No wonder today future growth has been revised down in every year of the scorecard. The papers are reporting that 1 in 8 business leaders is planning to leave Britain. Even one of Labour's biggest ever donors, Lakshmi Mittal, has fled the country.
Fled with a passport.
What we have in front of us is a budget littered with broken promises. She stood on a manifesto which promised better returns for UK savers. Today, she's putting up taxes on savings, on salary sacrifice even. She promised to give pensioners the security and retirement they deserve. Today, she slapped higher taxes on people saving for their pension. She promised to make Britain the best place in the world to invest and do business. Today, she has raised the dividend tax rates. She and the Prime Minister had already broken their promise to freeze council tax, but today she's decided to go even further, introducing a new property tax clobbering family homes that will only raise small amounts. This is Labour's Britain. This is Labour's Britain. People who work hard, Madam Deputy Speaker, people who work hard and save hard to buy their homes get taxed more, while those who don't work, who in some cases refuse to work, get their accommodation paid for by taxpayers. And then to top it all off, because taxing your home, your car, your savings and your pension wasn't enough, she has, by her own admission, broken her manifesto promise on income tax. Because in the last budget, she said, and I quote, "I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto, so there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax thresholds." She said in that budget that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people and take money out of their payslips. But today, she has done exactly that. Why should anyone believe anything she's promised in this budget? And so where is the money going? Small changes to rail fares and prescriptions, these are distractions while she steals your wallet. The real story here, Madam Deputy Speaker, the real story is that Labour have lost control of welfare spending. Not only will working people have their tax thresholds frozen while benefits go up in line with inflation, not only have Labour abandoned reforms that would have saved the taxpayer £5 billion after pressure from these backbenchers, today they have added another £3 billion to the bill by scrapping the two-child benefit cap. We introduced that cap, Madam Deputy Speaker, because it means people on benefits have to make the same decisions about having children as everyone else. Even Labour voters know that it strikes the right balance between supporting people who are struggling and protecting taxpayers who are struggling themselves. Just this summer, the Chancellor admitted that lifting the two-child benefit cap was not affordable. But that was before the Prime Minister accidentally fired the starting gun on the race to replace him. So now he and the Chancellor are buying the votes of their own MPs with taxpayers' money. If she wants to reduce child poverty, she should stop taxing their parents and stop destroying their jobs. She congratulated herself on a new tax on landlords. Let me tell her this. Hiking tax on landlords will only push up rents. It will push landlords out of the market. The people who will suffer are the tenants. And then she talks about taxes on electric vehicles. These changes will hit rural drivers the hardest, but we know that Labour don't care about rural people. All this budget delivers is higher taxes and out-of-control spending. Nobody voted for this. The Chancellor must take responsibility. She chose to impose the jobs tax, driving unemployment higher month after month. She chose to abandon welfare reform, meaning the benefits bill is spiralling. She chose to spend more and more money she didn't have, leaving taxpayers to foot the bill. She is out of money, out of ideas, out of her depth, and she has run out of road. The country simply cannot afford a Chancellor who can't keep her own promises. Her position is untenable, and she knows it. She's talking to the Chancellor. Is he mansplaining to you, by the way? Is he mansplaining? Do you want some help? Would you like some help? What the Prime Minister should do is grow a backbone and sack her. But he won't, because he knows if she goes down, he goes down with her. So we're stuck with them both, Laurel and Foolhardy. Does she have any sympathy for the people facing Christmas without a salary because of her jobs tax? For the retailers who are suffering sleepless nights because of their plummeting Christmas sales? People out there are crying. Last year, we had the horrors of the Halloween budget. This year is the nightmare before Christmas. And as for her, she's the unwelcome Christmas guest, 10 minutes through the door, and she's eaten all the Quality Street, Madam Deputy Speaker. But let me tell the Chancellor something she has forgotten. Behind every line in today's Red Book is a family, a home, a lifetime of work and sacrifice. People are frightened, and they have every reason to be. The Chancellor has spent the last year terrifying them. Every decision that she and the Prime Minister make puts more pressure on the people who keep this country going. If Labour are the party of working people, why is it that every day under them, thousands more people are signing off work and onto benefits? It's Conservatives who are the party of work. The Labour Party should be renamed the Welfare Party. And they are making a mistake. The British public don't want higher welfare spending. They want people in work providing for themselves. They want to live in a country where hard work pays, where what you put in reflects what you get out. And we agree with them. There is an alternative. We Conservatives have set it out. This budget could have saved £47 billion, including £23 billion from welfare. She could have applied our golden economic rule, allocating half of those savings to cutting the deficit and using the rest to cut taxes. Oh, they're all pretending they're not listening. It's the shame of the mess they've made. It's the shame of the mess they've made.
Order. Mr. Vince. Mr. Thompson, you're so enthusiastic. I was worried you're going to knock Mr. War off his chair a moment ago, so we need to calm down and breathe, and we need to ensure that we can hear the Leader of the Opposition. Kenny Badenoch.
Even the dog is laughing at the Chancellor, Madam Deputy Speaker. She could have applied our golden economic rule, allocating half of those savings to cutting the deficit, using the rest to cut taxes. She could have abolished stamp duty on homes to get the housing market moving, abolished business rates on shops to breathe life into our high streets. She could have introduced our cheap power plan. It saves a lot more money than what she announced would bring down energy costs for homes and businesses. That's what she should have done. She should be on the side of people who get up and go to work, people who take a risk to start a company, people working all hours to keep their business afloat. She should be on the side of the farmer, trying to hand something over to the next generation. The investor, deciding whether to spend their money in the UK or elsewhere. She should be on the side of the young person, looking for their first job. The saver, doing the right thing and putting money away for a rainy day. The pensioner, trying to enjoy a decent retirement. This country works when you make the country work for them. Only the Conservatives are on their side, Madam Deputy Speaker, and our plan for them is simple. Bring down energy costs, cut spending, cut tax, back business, and get Britain working again.
Colleagues are exiting. Can they do so quietly and quickly before we come to our first backbench contribution? Quietly and quickly. Other colleagues who are trying to catch my eye should return to their seats. I have noticed them bobbing. And we come to the chair of the Select Committee. We come to Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, it seems like some ways a very long time since 2022. Remember that, where we had a Prime Minister and a Chancellor who put this country in hock to the bond markets, made mortgages rise and put the British public through living hell. What a contrast with my right honourable friend today, who has put money into the NHS, is backing investment in our country, supporting start-ups and supporting the British public in a difficult cost of living crisis caused by the party opposite. And while I want to go into what the Chancellor said today, I cannot let go without making some comments about the Right Honourable Member for Essex, the Leader of the Opposition. Who was shambolic, Madam Deputy Speaker? Them. Under them, mortgages went up. And we saw children entering in poverty in greater numbers. So who is the party that created child poverty? Them, not us. And who is the party that has consistently talked down this country since the election, being negative on every stage and downgrading people's confidence in our country? Who is the party of 0 hours contracts? The party opposite. And who is the party that failed consistently to invest in our schools? The party opposite. And the NHS, and our prisons, and our justice system. Under them, the country spiralled. And I spent a decade under the last government looking at public spending in the privileged role of chair of the Public Accounts Committee. I saw those mistakes close up. I saw the big nasties left, whichever government was elected in July last year. And I commend my right honourable friend for tackling those challenges. And the productivity that we've seen challenges on as a result of the OBR's decisions has been low since 2010. And who was in government since 2010? The party opposite. So they left the legacy, they left the big nasties, and it's now this government's job to clear it up. But amid all the noise, Madam Deputy Speaker, we must remember that the markets are listening, and we need to all be responsible. Government, opposition, every member of this House. And while speculation always swirls around a budget, and that is inevitable because we're all lobbying on behalf of our constituents, our local businesses and every other group that we represent, quite rightly, to persuade our government to do the things that we want to see. And we're all impatient to see those things happen yesterday. That's why we got elected, to make change. But the leaks that have happened around this budget have been very unfortunate. And I do hope my right honourable friend will grapple with this and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And the most recent leak of the OBR data, moments before her budget, is undermining for us all. So we will be raising that with the Office for Budget Responsibility when they appear in front of the Select Committee next week. But the Treasury Select Committee looked at a number of the issues that were being speculated around the budget: child poverty, gambling tax, cash ISAs, and others. And I'm grateful that my right honourable friend has tackled some of these. I wanted to touch first on cash ISAs. We, in a report, recommended that the Chancellor didn't reduce the limit on cash ISAs from £20,000, and she has reduced it not from the 10 that was being mooted, but to 12. The concern is that for short-term savers, there can be a real issue there. And with targeted support coming next year and work on the advice guidance boundary, there is an opportunity to bring the British public into a more investing environment and to make them invest or encourage them to invest more. But after so many years, when we've all been warned that your capital is at risk, like on the cigarette packets, that you might die if you smoke, it takes a long time to turn that culture around. Yes. I do want to pay tribute to the financial inclusion and literacy campaign that the Financial Times backs, which is running a programme in Shoreditch Park City Academy in my constituency over 3 years, with years 7, 8 and 9, to encourage them to teach them about financial literacy. Yeah. They will be the investors of the future, but it will take some time for those young people to get to the point where they invest. So I am pleased that the Chancellor did exempt over 65s from this limit, because that short-term saving is important, and particularly for that age group that is planning for retirement or indeed in retirement. Yeah. I really welcome her support for start-ups. In my constituency, this is a huge issue, and widening enterprise support, something that I know my sister committee, the Business and Trade Committee, will no doubt be looking at. And encouraging companies to list in London, absolutely right. The 3-year stamp duty relief will hopefully be enough to encourage that. We've seen too many companies listing elsewhere, and we need them here in the UK to grow our economy and create those jobs. There's a lot of technical issues around reviews of business tax, which I'm sure we will be looking over. We're putting our slide rule across all of the measures in the budget today. I note that the Chancellor is talking about 4.9% billion of efficiencies by government departments by 2031. That is going to be a potential challenge, and so I think the Public Accounts Committee, another sister committee, will no doubt be looking at that alongside the Treasury Select Committee. But I'm really pleased that she's giving HMRC more powers to pursue promoters of tax avoidance schemes. We know what the problems have been there, and the Treasury Select Committee has the privilege and responsibility of challenging His Majesty's Revenue and Customs regularly, and they will be in front of us in January, and we'll be able to ask them more about that then. But for me, one of the central planks for me as a constituency MP of why we needed a Labour government, because of what the other party did to children living in poverty. There are 4.5 million children in poverty in this country. That's gone up by almost 1 million since 2012. 2 million of them are in deep poverty, and that's 1 in 3 children living below the poverty line in 2025 in the United Kingdom. Children are sharing beds with their siblings or parents turning up to school tired, and every weekend I visit people in my constituency and I see this challenge. Just last weekend, a woman showed me the bedroom she shares with her now disabled husband because he had a stroke 3 years ago. And she has a curtain between their double bed and a narrow space so her daughter can share their room, while in their case, luckily, they have a second bedroom where her 2 sons sleep in a bunk bed. That is the reality for so many children, and the poverty impacts their learning and their ability to perform in the world. And it is a shameful stain on this country that when this government entered power, the UK ranked 37th out of 39 advanced economies on child poverty. I will certainly go away.
Really grateful to it. I agree with everything she just said about child poverty and welcome the lifting of the cap. But is there a little bit of a blind spot for this government on rural poverty? Government figures themselves show by the end of next year the average hill farmer will earn barely just above half the national minimum wage. Is she as disappointed as I am that the government has not tackled this in the budget and indeed got rid of the family farm tax, which is going to tax many of them out of existence altogether?
The Honourable Gentleman is a veritable champion for his constituency and for rural issues. I think there are very big, important changes here in the minimum wage and the living wage, which will have an impact, and there's lots that could be welcomed for rural areas too. But I recognise that his constituency and mine sometimes have very different challenges, and I welcome the fact that he does champion that here. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to look through the Red Book and the Blue Book at this point, but we will bear that in mind on the committee. But 70% of children in poverty are in working families. So the idea that the chutzpah of the Leader of the Opposition to stand up and say this is a lifestyle choice for people really makes my blood boil. 60% of households hit by the limit are in work, and 15% of affected families are mothers with babies too young for work. And my right honourable friend said it better than any of us could. The Victorian rape clause, the humiliation that women face, that affects notionally 3,600 women, but we heard evidence in the Treasury Select Committee of women who will not put themselves or their children through that humiliation. And any policy that required a workaround like that is outdated and long needed to be gone, and I commend my right honourable friend. And there's been further investment in young people. Certainly.
I thank her for a forensic analysis of our budget, but will she take an intervention from the Leader of the Opposition so she can apologise for this awful policy and its impact?
Well, it is interesting that they're doubling down, the opposition is doubling down on this policy, which is humiliating people. And let's be clear, the birth rate in this country has fallen year on year for the last 3 years. It is well below where it needs to be. I think only in Luton is it actually at 2.1%, which is about where it needs to be. Well, actually, it's a bit lower than where it needs to be. This is a real crisis for this country in the long term. So it's absolutely right that my right honourable friend is investing in the future of Britain. These young people may be poor. In my constituency, they're poor, but they are not, no poverty of ambition there. Children I met when I was elected 20 years ago are now doctors, are barristers, are enterprising business people. In spite of the challenges they face, just think about the ones who didn't get there because they didn't overcome the challenges of deep-seated poverty. So we should invest in our young people, and that is what this government is doing, including with the apprenticeships and the youth guarantee and the 9 youth hubs in London, and one of which is in my constituency. And I really welcome that my right honourable friend listened to the Treasury Select Committee on the gambling taxation regime. We're a cross-party committee, but we had a unanimous report saying that there was a real issue about the lower tax on online gaming and because of the relative harm that that caused compared to going to the races or popping along to your local betting shop. So I very much welcome my right honourable friend's decision to do that, which is contributing to that the payment to take out those children out of poverty. I do on the lifetime, the ISA changes. I just wonder, I caution to my right honourable friend that I hope that the Treasury is watching very closely the impact on mortgage lending by building societies, because in the evidence we heard that was a concern. And if we want to get people into their own homes with the building that's going to be going on, we need to make sure that those mortgages are available to them. So I hope that the Treasury is in ongoing dialogue on that issue, despite this change having been made. But we now need to recognise some of the challenges as well about green taxes. And I haven't had a chance to go through the Red Book in the time since the Chancellor sat down. But I very much welcome my right honourable friend's bold and necessary decision to take on the challenge of the reduction in fuel duty as people move to electric vehicles. This has been a point of debate for at least the last decade or so. Certainly on the time that I was on the Public Accounts Committee, we kept challenging the Treasury about how they're going to fill that gap. And my right honourable friend has been bold and right to challenge that. It's a difficult one to grapple with, but she's great that she's done that, and I think we need to be, we'll look forward to hearing more about that. And in terms of supporting people because of the cost of living, the freeze on rail fares, keeping the bus fare cap, these are things that help people get to work. And the ongoing freeze on fuel duty will help with that too. And the increase in the minimum wage and the living wage are vital. In my constituency, some people work 4 jobs over 7 days just to make ends meet. If they're lucky to have a council tenancy, even on those salaries, it's hard to make ends meet. If you try to go into the private sector, completely unaffordable if you're on that kind of income. And yet contrast that with people who earn enough to work 4 days a week because they can afford to do so. I'm not criticising them for that life choice, but that is the challenge and the difference that's faced. So the challenge on, there's been a lot of discussion, of course, about a high value property tax. In my constituency, on a rough calculation, around 1% of properties are worth over 2 million in central London. So when the opposition scream foul on this, I think in zone 1 and 2 in central London, right on the edge of the city, 10 minutes from Liverpool Street, around 1% of people will face that surcharge. That is a small price to pay when next door our families are living in the deepest poverty that I have described. And it's great to see some movement on energy bills, which is having a really, really big impact. There's a lot more detail in this budget, which the Treasury Select Committee will be looking at over the next couple of weeks. And we look forward to welcoming the Chancellor to the committee on the 10th of December, where we will both ask her to explain, but we will also challenge her, as is our proper constitutional responsibility, about the detail of her budget.
I call the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And we're looking forward to the Treasury Select Committee challenging the government on the details. But Madam Deputy Speaker, this government was elected on a promise of tackling the cost of living and growing the economy, and this is the second budget where it's failed to do either. For millions of people struggling with higher bills, all this budget really offers is higher taxes. The OBR sets it out in black and white. Disposable income, living standards are down thanks to this budget. Surely the Chancellor should have learned from her first failed budget that you can't tax your way to growth. Under the Conservatives, the UK's tax burden reached its highest level since 1948 and it hit the economy. Yet under this budget, the tax burden will hit an all-time high. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is an alternative to all these Conservative and Labour taxes, and the shocking reality is the government knows it, and that's a new trade deal with Europe. A major new deal to cut the cost of living and grow our economy. The truth is, Madam Deputy Speaker, Boris Johnson's Brexit deal has cost the Treasury £90 billion a year in lower tax revenue. Imagine if the Chancellor had adopted our plan to reverse those Brexit costs. Imagine how much more we could be helping families and pensioners across our country with the cost of living. Imagine how we could be ending the cost of living crisis today.
Order. I made it very clear earlier on, and you're a senior member of the House. No intervention should be made, nor will be taken. Dick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm happy to talk to him in the tea room afterwards. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government know the damage the Conservative reform Brexit deal has done to every family and every business across our country. And yet they choose to reject the single biggest policy for ending the cost of living crisis, turbocharging economic growth and boosting tax revenues without raising tax. A new trade deal with Europe, properly fixing our broken relationship with Europe with a new customs union. Growing our economy by freeing British businesses from the costs, barriers and red tape favoured by the Conservatives and Reform. Rather than trying to tax their way out of debt, as Labour is choosing, Liberal Democrats would grow our way out of debt. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be fair to the Chancellor, she has recently spoken about the terrible damage that the Conservatives' Brexit deal has done to our economy. The deal that promised to save us £350 million a week, but ended up costing the taxpayer £1.7 billion every week. But where is the Chancellor's urgency and ambition to fix the problem she rightly identifies? Today she didn't even mention the huge hit to the Treasury from Brexit. She is like a doctor who has diagnosed the disease but refuses to administer the cure. Refusing to take up our plan for a brand new deal with the EU, a much better deal for Britain than anything the government has pursued so far, with a new customs union at its heart. Madam Deputy Speaker, everyone but the most extreme Brexiteers now realise what a costly economic disaster the Brexit deal has been. Whether you're a young family struggling with ever higher food prices, or a high street business just trying to survive the chance of the latest new cost or tax, people are understandably looking for a credible economic policy to change their futures for the better. And it's crystal clear now. Only the Liberal Democrats are providing the leadership on our economy people are crying out for. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are some measures the Chancellor has announced today that we do welcome. At last, she has decided to tax the big online gambling firms by raising remote gaming duty, as the Liberal Democrats have been calling for. Problem gambling is related to hundreds of suicides every year. So, of course, online casinos and the like should absolutely pay more tax on their huge profits. Her decision to scrap the rate clause is an excellent one. And I may not have heard the Leader of the Opposition, but I wasn't sure if she welcomed that. I hope the Conservative Party will welcome that. And the Chancellor's decision to scrap the two-child limit is excellent. It was in our general election manifesto, and I'm glad that she is now enacting Liberal Democrat policy. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's clearly the most effective way of lifting children out of poverty, and it will save taxpayers' money in the long term. And the biggest relief today for millions of families and pensioners is the action the Chancellor is taking to reduce energy bills, and we welcome it. But even after the Chancellor's changes, it will still leave the typical household paying hundreds of pounds a year more on their energy bills than 5 years ago. So more action will be needed. But we need action on energy bills that works. Reform and the Conservative Party pretend that the answer to rising energy bills is to scrap our climate commitments and stop investing in renewables. They couldn't be more wrong. The Conservative reform energy policy would put up bills and just make the UK even more reliant on imported fossil fuels with their volatile and high prices. That would be a disaster for our economy, a disaster for our environment, and a disaster for jobs, and a disaster for people struggling with energy bills. Madam Deputy Speaker, a major winner from reform's energy policies would be Vladimir Putin. Now that might explain why the Honourable Member for Clacton is so keen on it. So I urge the government, don't listen to the Conservatives or Reform. Be more ambitious in cutting people's energy bills. Take up our plan to cut energy bills even more right now and to cut them in half within a decade, finally giving families and pensioners the relief they need from this cost of living crisis. Madam Deputy Speaker, while there are some things to welcome, which I've just done, there are quite a lot of measures in this budget that will cause a lot of pain and unfairness, all of which could have been avoided if the Chancellor had gone for growth with Europe instead. Her plans to tax salary sacrifice will be hugely damaging to savings and pensions, and it looks like it's another NI hit on workers, Madam Deputy Speaker. And why, when the electricity vehicle market still needs a boost to get going, is she taxing electric vehicles? And if she wasn't spending £1.8 billion on digital ID, many of these tax rises would not have been needed in the first place. And her failure to U-turn on the family farm tax is a huge error. Madam Speaker, if the Chancellor was really looking to tax those with the broadest shoulders, then why not put a windfall tax on the big banks who are literally making billions at the taxpayers' expense due to a side effect of quantitative easing? But the worst tax hike of this budget by far, the biggest tax rise of this budget, is the Chancellor's decision to repeat the Conservative policy of freezing income tax thresholds. Freezing these thresholds reduces the amount people can earn tax-free and hits the lowest paid the hardest. But I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, hearing the Conservative leader criticise it now rings incredibly hollow. And I think the member for Berkshire was objecting to her comments. The leader of the opposition cheered Conservative budgets after Conservative budgets that did exactly the same thing as the Chancellor did, raising taxes on the low paid. The Conservatives dragged an extra 4 million people on very low incomes into paying income tax and an extra 3.5 million people into paying the 40p rate. And the OBR says this government is now planning to drag a further 750,000 low-paid workers into tax and nearly 1 million people into the 40p rate. So someone on the average salary is paying an extra £582 this year because of the Conservatives' policy, and under the Chancellor's plans, they will pay an extra £300 a year by 2031. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, contrast that with our record on income tax. We raised the personal allowance by £4,000. We cut income tax by £825 for millions of people and took 3.4 million of the lowest paid out of paying income tax altogether. It is clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Liberal Democrats are the only party that believes in cutting income tax for ordinary people. Labour and the Conservatives make them pay more. As well as adding income tax pain to families struggling with the cost of living crisis, this budget will also add to the cost of doing business crisis facing Britain's hospitality sector, where she went nowhere near far enough. Our high streets are suffering. Pubs, restaurants, cafes, caravan parks, zoos, even our beloved theme parks. They are struggling against higher business rates and the government's misguided jobs tax. The Liberal Democrats called on the Chancellor to help them with an emergency 5% VAT cut for hospitality for the next 18 months. That would have been a lifeline for some of our most beloved local businesses and for people's jobs, boosting local economies across Britain. And it is very disappointing that the Chancellor hasn't listened to our calls. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, can I say how disappointed I am with how little there was for carers in this budget. As a carer myself for much of my life, I'm determined to speak up for the millions of carers less fortunate than I am. Millions of family carers and care workers who make enormous sacrifices looking after loved ones. Carers who keep our NHS going. Carers who keep our society going. They deserve far more support from the government, and I will keep pressing their case. Now, I do welcome the carers allowance review, but it confirms our argument the carers allowance system is out of date and is in need of urgent change, and we're yet to hear commitments to those changes. I welcome the decision to reassess cases where overpayment has caused huge hardship, but with the changes not coming into force for another year, the government must instruct the DWP to immediately suspend repayments during that delay and swiftly deliver compensation. More needs to be done to help family carers juggle their jobs with their caring responsibilities. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, we urgently need the Social Care Commission to actually start fixing the system on a cross-party basis and make sure our loved ones get the care they need. The Chancellor cannot claim to be supporting our NHS properly, however much money she puts in, while she and Treasury officials keep blocking the social care reforms that alone can transform the health service across the country and boost our economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, a caring society, a growing economy, a plan to drive down household bills, boost high streets and go for growth with Europe. That is the vision the Chancellor should have set out today. Yep. Instead, we got a low-growth, high-tax budget from a government that I fear just isn't listening.
Catherine West.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's an honour to follow the leader of the Liberal Democrats in this debate, the member for Kingston and Surbiton. And put very simply, this is a family-friendly budget. Every family up and down the UK will be welcoming this. Gone is the vile rape clause, and an increase in family income is very, very welcome. We've been through many traumatic times together in this House. We've been through the global financial crisis and its long tail. We've been through Brexit, and the Right Honourable Member who spoke before me is quite right to emphasise the vast difference between our economy while we were in the European Union and now that we're not. And I welcome the work being done at Cabinet level and ask Cabinet to redouble their efforts to work on good trade arrangements under the EU-UK Security Pact to improve our economy and enlarge our economy. And of course, COVID. We heard of COVID this week with the report. And we all remember not just the impact on the economy, but the terrible impact, particularly on younger people, and the impact that long tail is having on so many of our young people who are still feeling too unwell to work or whose work opportunities have been severely reduced through anxiety, depression and all the other things which not just COVID but that context of fiscal austerity brought down upon them. Madam Deputy Speaker, I represent a multi-faith, multi-ethnic constituency which works really hard on community cohesion. When all is said and done, we rub along well together in Hornsey and Fry and Barnet. From recent rhetoric, it could be assumed that there is deep unhappiness and division. In fact, I want to put on record the opposite. I would like to put on record the contribution to our local economy from all parts of my constituency, regardless of skin colour, faith or school qualifications. Of course, my community also faces challenges. We have unacceptably high numbers of children living in households where incomes don't cover the basics: heating, eating and rent. And I really welcome today's statement on heating, help for households, on eating, school meals, more breakfast clubs, and helping in particular secondary school children with their nutrition, and rent, quite rightly introducing a little more tax on some of the landlords who, in a wealthy place like London, will be making quite a lot and can afford to pay a little more. It's my first budget as a member of the Treasury Committee, and this budget has rewarded those who fought to restore hope, stop the chaos of the 14 years of Conservative governments and deliver change. Remember the election? We promised change. Today we saw change. That change is an end to poverty-line family budgets, and the hope is that we finally see food banks close for good.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and especially she is a colleague with me on the Treasury Select Committee. In terms of the government delivering hope, a key part of the government's economic forecasting is, of course, the OBR. And a lot of what has driven the budget today is a 16 billion productivity downgrade by the OBR. We heard on the Treasury Select Committee that there was actually very little basis behind that productivity forecast in the first place, basically based on purely what the UK productivity was pre-2008, with not much little depth beyond that. So does the honourable member agree with me that the OBR has serious work to do to look at the robustness of its forecasts?
On the Treasury Select Committee for that, and I think there was quite a lot in today's budget on skills, on nutrition for children so that they can get their educational qualifications, and quite a lot that will help us to solve the productivity puzzle. But I do look forward to questioning with him the OBR on their data, how they got to that position, and how we can be helpful in pushing the government towards even more investment in skills, apprenticeships, and in deepening our investment in young people so that our productivity can improve over time. I know that so many of us here in the House are in politics because we want every child and every family to have the chance to thrive in school, in work, and in life. And let's look back at past Labour governments. In 1945, despair and hunger stalked many communities. London was flattened in the Blitz, and yet rationing would continue for 9 more years. Keynes famously said, anything we can actually do, we can afford. We are immeasurably richer than our predecessors. And then what did Labour do? Went on to build the NHS, built the country, built a welfare state. We can do this. We will make the UK fairer. And today is a really good start on that journey. Very briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I know so many people wish to speak today. As a former borough leader, I introduced school meals for all primary school children. It was a great equaliser and social leveller. Children were more focused, made better progress. Families who were just about managing saved money, and there was no stigma. Everyone sat together and talked with each other. Free school meals for all primary schools were subsequently rolled out across London, and we know from today that more secondary school children will benefit under the government's proposals. We need to continue to restore hope and deliver change. The two-child cap on universal credit, of course, another pro-family measure, the most cost-effective, quick measure to bring up to 500,000 children out of poverty, and paid for by the most addictive forms of gambling, which has been increased. My personal view is we could have gone even further on the gambling, and I hope that it raises between 1 and 3 billion, because I think that remote gambling in your bedroom, on your phone, is deeply damaging to society. The Trussell's September 2025 Hunger in the UK makes for sobering reading. In 2024, 16% of UK households were food insecure, which of course we know is not a food problem, it's an income problem, and this is an issue we must continue to interrogate. I'm very pleased to have secured a backbench debate on food inflation and poverty. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, together with school meals, more breakfast club provision, a higher living wage since the general election, slowly the living standards of families will turn around. It's particularly positive to see the first woman Chancellor recognise the impact which the difficult financial climate has had on families. I hope that by this time next year, once these measures are really embedded, we'll begin to see the closure of food banks. I've heard a lot about what we want to see by the end of this Parliament. Let's aim for a closure of food banks in this country by 2029. And we hope to feel that every child and every family will have the chance to thrive.
To help colleagues, they are now permitted to make an intervention, and a backbencher may wish to accept or decline that. And I call Sir Jeremy Hunt.
Budgets aren't easy for chancellors because there are so many things beyond your control, but being forced to make trade-offs reveals priorities. And I'm afraid today's priority was not economic growth, but political survival. That's because there was one central call the Chancellor had to make today. Do we reform welfare or do we raise tax? Getting our welfare bill down to pre-pandemic levels would save about £47 billion a year within 5 years. It wouldn't have been easy, but it would have meant no tax rises and plenty of headroom in public finances. Instead, welfare spend is going up and jobs and growth are going down. In every single day of the government's first year, around 2,200 people have been signed off, not just working, but even having to look for work. That's 1 million more people on universal credit just in the last year. Most of those claimants cite mental health, but every doctor I ever spoke to as health secretary said that people with anxiety and depression need social contact. That means being at work, not being at home. So this could, I would very happily give way to the chair of the Select Committee.
On the point of mental health, he's absolutely right to point out that that is one of the drivers of people going on universal credit that does need tackling. So does he share my alarm that today in the HSJ it's been reported that this government's planning to water down the mental health investment standard, which starts to reverse the trend that we saw over many years of achieving parity of esteem between physical and mental health?
I absolutely share the Honourable Lady's concern about that. That was introduced when I was Health Secretary. And this could have been the budget in which the Chancellor announced that we will speed up treatment for people with mental illness and not park them on welfare. This could have been the budget that said that we will eliminate fraud by stopping completely benefit applications by phone. It could have been the budget that said that instead of relying on migration to help firms expand, we will make sure that people at home are fit to join the workforce. Instead, the welfare bill is going up by around £14 billion, not least because of the totally unfair abolition of the two-child cap, which I fear will see more children, not less, living in the structural poverty caused when there are no adults in the household at work. And I will happily give way to...
He surely, given his background, must recognise that there is a direct link between social policy and economic policy, that this country needs a working-age population to fund future pensions and welfare bills for generations in the future. How on earth can you do that if you're not encouraging children to be brought up and raised in a household that can afford to feed them?
Order. How on earth can you do that? We can't start off these 4 days of budget debate with the word you and your. So quickly, come to your conclusion with the right language.
Well, I think she brought me to order just at the right time.
I recognise that the Honourable Gentleman's concern about child poverty is sincere. I just have a totally different view as to how to reduce child poverty in this country. I think financing people to have ever larger families means more children growing up in poverty, not less. And I think the evidence for that is that under the previous Conservative government, we had 1 million fewer children growing up in workless households, and child poverty in absolute terms fell. And he needs to look at that evidence. And the taxes and the price we are paying for this mushrooming welfare bill is that taxes are growing up and they are already starting to destroy growth. 180,000 fewer payroll jobs in the last year. Unemployment up, inflation up, interest rates higher than they would have been. And the tragedy is that absolute poverty, which, as I said, fell under the previous Conservative governments, is now likely to rise